What is up, guys? Trevy here again from Way of the Swan, and it's finally happened. The wait is over, and Mark 3 of War Machine and Hordes, or the new edition, I guess I should say, has finally been released. And it is time to ask that question, what is new with this new edition? And I'm going to hopefully answer that question to the best that I can in this little video series. It's going to be 4 videos long. Each episode is going to cover a different section of the core rulebook that has changed in the transition from Mark II to the new edition. I'm going to go over all the little rules that have been altered slightly, and I'm going to go over hopefully what kind of impact that's going to have on your games and some basic examples of ways you can utilize those rules or how they change the way the game's played. This first episode is going to be going over any core, basically combat rules that have changed. Episode 2 is going to be Warcasters, Warjacks, Warlocks, and Warbeasts, all the changes for them. The third video is going to be units, and then the final video is going to be terrain and scenarios. Now, a little bit of a caveat. Obviously, I haven't had a ton of time to go over these rule books, so I might have missed some rules changes or potentially misread some rules. I hope that didn't happen. But if it does, or if you find any new rules that I've missed, or just any rules that you really like, any cool interactions that you found in the game or between specific models, feel free to go ahead and post those in the comment section. I would love to read them, and I'm sure it would help a lot of other people watching this video as well. Second caveat, I recorded this video on a little crappy handheld camera I have, and unfortunately the audio didn't turn out as well as I would have hoped. Normally I would go over and just redub these things in, with my audio equipment, but unfortunately I really want to get this video out as quickly as possible, so I didn't end up spending the time doing that. So brace yourself for some slightly grody audio. It's still legible, but it's not the most pleasant thing in the world. These rules changes, and I really hope they help you playing in your games. The first one I'm not going to have much of a description for is that universal pre-measuring is now a rule in the game. You can measure any distance, anytime, any way you want. Obviously, that was announced by Privateer Press, but I figured I'd go over it real quick here. It's going to make the game way cleaner and way easier to play, and it's going to be super awesome.
So the first thing in the rulebook that really changed are the advantages that some models have, and the first one we'll go over, and one of the biggest changes is incorporeal. Now, you may or may not be aware, incorporeal generated a huge amount of problems in the Mark II rules, the way it was worded. It caused all sorts of headaches. The Infernals had to come up with like weird new words and terms within the rule set in order to make the rule work, and it was awful, and everyone hated it, and no one is sad that it's different now. So while it used to make a model immune to non-spell effects, which made it all super weird, and they could do things like make free strikes when a model passed through them, so you can move through an incorporeal model, and if the Stalker was trying to get to Haley present here, he would have to move through Haley past, and once he passed her front arc like that, she would make a free strike with him, lose incorporeal, so he would lose the ability to move through her, and we would generate an illegal game state with a model whose base is overlapping another model, and he would bump back to his last legal position to here. And that made incorporeal models way too good at blocking up charge lanes and things like that. So in the new edition, they simply cannot make free strikes while they're incorporeal. However, they still lose incorporeal if they make a melee or ranged attack, which means that they're not going to simply be terrible at jamming, but it'll be a little bit more difficult to use them, and you'll have to use them a little more sparingly. Incorporeal models still can't be moved by a slam or a push, so if this Stalker tried to push or slam Haley past while she was incorporeal, he would end up attacking her and hitting her, but he wouldn't do any damage since his attack is not magical, and he would also not slam her because incorporeal stops her from being slammed. Interestingly enough, though, because incorporeal no longer makes you immune to non-magic effects, it doesn't say anything about models being slammed over her. So assuming this little sentinel was here, and the Stalker wanted to clear the path over to here to Haley present for Chromac, he could come in and slam the sentinel, and the sentinel would travel over Haley past. She wouldn't take damage from it, but she would still be knocked down, which is, I think, a little interesting little tidbit there. I don't know if it's super relevant most of the time, but it might be for Warcasters like Denegre 2, who used to just be basically immune to knockdown from slams, and now that is gone. So a little bit of a change there. Another advantage that changed pretty significantly is tough. Tough obviously used to be that when you were disabled on a 5 or a 6, you were knocked down and healed a damage point. It's still the same, it does exactly that. The difference is that it turns off once you're knocked down. So obviously a model with tough, like these boom howlers, ignoring the fact that they can call Cry of Defiance and ignore that rule, as soon as they would be disabled, they roll the die. They only get one of those, and once they're knocked down, they won't be able to take a second tough check. So in the past, this situation could have been pretty bad for this Warpwolf Stalker. If the Warpwolf Stalker wanted to get to Kane, and maybe Chromac would come up here and try to clear him out, he would come in and start swinging on these boom howlers in the front here, and would have a tough time actually killing them. Tough time. I did that totally on purpose, don't worry about it. It could, if the Signar player was rolling pretty well, it could potentially be that Chromac wasn't able to kill enough for the Warpwolf Stalker to move through and get to Kane. One more change that's pretty important for me as a Signar player is that models with immunity to electricity never have lightning arc to them as the result of a special rule. So the most important, or the most prevalent special rules that generate this are Lightning Generator and Electroleap. So here we have a little example of how powerful this can be. Let's say we have these Stormblade Infantry or a similar unit jammed up here by these Tharn Blood Trackers. Now the Stormblades really want to get their big Stormglaives in to make mincemeat of this Warpwolf, and unfortunately they can't do that because somebody put all these stupid Tharn Blood Trackers in the way. But here come the Storm Guard to the rescue, and what these guys are going to be able to do is, with this new rule, they can charge in potentially into the Tharn Blood Trackers, and once they make their attacks, if this guy potentially hits her, he's going to ignore all these models for being the closest in order to determine the target of the Electroleap. It's going to go to her, and we're going to start killing these models pretty quickly. So as you can see, that's going to be pretty important for models with Electroleap, especially melee models with Electroleap that really want to get in there and not lose any of that potential damage output by hitting friendly models with their lightning bounces. A couple other advantage changes that aren't super relevant. Blessed also ignores Animi. Given that Animi are spells now, which I will talk about in a future episode. And then Undead, not really giving any bonuses besides a model not being living. And Undead models also don't generate soul tokens. It's basically all that being Undead does for you. So not as much as it used to. Another important change for Signar players that I know my brothers in blue aren't going to like is that Disruption is now a continuous effect, and as such, while it only lasts a round, it can still expire before it comes into play. Meaning that, let's say for example, the Stormcaller here shot a Stormcall, a single strike at the Slayer. He got lucky, he got a crit Disruption. Now, the Thunderhead here thinks he's safe, being close enough to that Slayer, so he went off and pulsed and did something really cool with his turn. Unfortunately, if you roll a 1 or a 2 on this Slayer, he can now receive focus points, and so he's going to get fueled up and come in and put the hurt down on Thunderhead, and that's going to be super sad for the Signar player. So unfortunately, Disruption, not as powerful an effect as it used to be. Another important change is that models can't target friendly models with a charge now. Obviously this is extremely important, and I'll just set up a little scenario to illustrate. So here we have Lord Commander Striker, obviously, pretty big melee beat stick, and he has it in for this Warpwolf Stalker hiding behind the forest here. He really wants that Warpwolf Stalker dead. Unfortunately, the Warpwolf Stalker is playing pretty cagey and is hiding behind this forest, so nobody can see him. Now, assuming Striker is maybe a little bit farther away, and he's probably going to need to get some pretty significant distance to get into on this Warpwolf Stalker, and assuming he can't just advance and then velocity into melee, a lot of times what he'd do in Mark II is he would take one of these poor hapless Stormblades here, and he would run in front of Striker's way. Striker would charge him, and maybe he got Path to Victory from Runewood or March from Rupert. Now he can do that. He could cast Velocity now and advance up to 6 inches, so he could just walk, not have that Stormblade in melee anymore, so he wouldn't have to make a charge attack, and then make attacks against this Warpwolf Stalker. Unfortunately, that's not a course of action he can do that, no. So if Striker's too far away to walk into melee with this Warpwolf here, he's going to have a sad time, and he's not going to be able to attack him. So obviously another huge change. It's going to change a lot of how the game's played. Another potentially huge change to movement is that it's very difficult for a model to forfeit its movement now. Unfortunately, a model can't forfeit its movement voluntarily unless it has a special rule that allows it to do so, unless it wants to aim. Now, it used to be that you could only you would not gain the +2 to hit when you aimed if you were in melee, but now you simply can't forfeit your movement to aim at all if you're in melee. So let's say that Ashlyn DeLeast here literally has her back up against the wall. Things are not looking good for her. Maybe Cormac over here came in, killed all of her buddies, and she's got to fight this Warpwolf Stalker. Now this Warpwolf Stalker, assuming it's already in melee with her, seems like it would be pretty good. Back in the day, it could just aim if she has admonition cast on her to stop her from triggering the admonition. But now, since he's not able to aim since he's engaging Ashlyn, he has to advance 0 inches during his normal movement, and it automatically triggers admonition, which allows Ashlyn to back out of combat. And then the next turn she can come in and get some work done and just keep doing that over and over again. So obviously effects like countercharge and admonition are going to be hugely changed by this alteration, and they're going to be a lot more powerful in the new edition. So moving into ranged attacks, we have a big change to Gunfighter. Now Gunfighter, while it's mostly the same, it still lets you make melee attacks in a half-inch melee range, and you ignore the targeting melee penalty when you are in melee with your target. It also allows you to make ranged attacks targeting models you are in melee with. So that's a little bit more open-ended than it used to be. It used to only allow you to make ranged attacks targeting models in your melee range. And here's an example illustrating this. So let's say this Warpwolf Stalker here has engaged these 2 Black 13th members, Watson Lynch, with his 2-inch reach sword. So he's going to, they're going to be able to attack him since they're within 2 inches of him, even though they only have a half-inch melee range since they're in melee. Now this is really powerful if Ryan, who's all the way back here, also wants to attack this Warpwolf Stalker. She's going to be able to, and it's a little weird. Now, assuming she doesn't want to charge for some reason, maybe these guys want to, I don't know, have a party. She could theoretically charge with Gunfighter, but assuming she doesn't, she can advance her speed of 6. She's a little too far away to get within half an inch of that Warpwolf, but she can walk up to within 2 inches of it, and she can still make her range attacks targeting that Warpwolf, and then ignoring the target in melee penalty. So obviously that's a pretty big change. Now, unfortunately, if she does miss the Warpwolf, she's still going to potentially hit one of her buddies with her gunshots, which could be bad. But obviously, engaging gunfighters isn't quite as easy as it used to be. Another one of these big changes is a change to Assault. Now, Assault's, well, it used to be a bunch of different rules that used to live all sorts of different places in the game. There was a different version for infantry and solos and warjacks, and everybody had their own little flavor of Assault. Now it's just a base rule that you can find as an advantage on some models' cards. These Stormblade infantry get it as a granted ability from the officer. Now it's a little bit different. Well, it still allows you to make a charge, and then as part of your charge, make a ranged attack targeting the bottle you charged. It also allows you to make that ranged attack even if you fail a charge. So if this Stormblade wanted to charge this Blood Tracker that was very far away, it could move up and still make his ranged attack even if he was in melee here, and if he had failed his charge, he could make that attack before his activation ended. However, the big difference is that it doesn't innately ignore the target in melee penalty, which it used to. So you used to be able to declare an assault and then be able to ignore a model that, or ignore the +4 defense that being in melee could give your opponent, which is a pretty big deal, especially for warjacks and warbeasts with assault. They could basically pay one focus to ignore that penalty, and now that's no longer the case. However, models, as just an innate rule, ignore the target in melee defense bonus if they are in melee with the target. So if these Stormblade infantry wanted to assault this Warpwolf Stalker, they could all get in there. And then obviously this Warpwolf Stalker is in melee. However, they're going to ignore the target in melee defense bonus when they're making their assault attacks. These guys in the back that are a little bit screwed though, especially like this Storm Gunner. If he wants to, stay far back to be safe, he wants to assault this Warpwolf and hit so that the rest of his unit can hit automatically. But unfortunately, if he can't quite make it into melee, that Warpwolf is still going to get the +4 defense from being engaged, even though it's an assault shot. Now, at the end of your activation, if you have multiple effects that trigger at the end of your activation that allow you to move, 2 examples being sprint and reposition, you only get to choose one of them to use now. Well, in the past, you could choose multiple effects and trigger them at the same time. For example, in Mark II, a lot of times what you would do with a caster like Morvana II, who had a 5-inch reposition move from Light Cav, and then she could also gain sprint from this Warpwolf Stalker. She could come into a model like the Slayer over here. She comes in with her Life Trader attacks and rerolls, and she has a very good shot of killing off that Slayer. Now, at the end of her activation in Mark 2, she could trigger a 5-inch light cap move, followed by an 8-inch sprint move, and really get very far away. Now, however, she's going to have to, she has to cast Lightning Strike on herself rather than the Stalker doing it for her. And she charges in, and once she kills the Slayer off, she's only going to be able to trigger one of those effects. So if she has to charge too far to sprint back 8 inches to where she wants to be, probably in these shifting stones, who could place her an additional 8 inches, she's going to be unable to reach them if she's not within 8 inches. She's not going to get that extra 5 inches of movement. So just a couple more quick changes before we wrap up this episode. The first one is that back striking has changed from being from requiring the attacker to remain its entire activation completely behind the defender. So, for example, in Mark 2, if this Slayer here wanted to get backstrike on Morvana 2 so he could kill her, she would have to basically be facing like that, and then he would have to remain behind her for the entirety of his activation. Now, it just requires you to be completely within the target's back arc. So, in order for the Slayer in this situation to get the backstrike bonus on Morvana, he could just move. He could just advance around, and as long as he's outside her front arc here, he's going to get that +2 to hit and probably put her right in the dirt. Now, obviously, this could incur a free strike from her 2-inch melee range there, but that might be worth it if you could just end the game real quick. Now, this is particularly important for models with backstab. Backstab now just requires you to be behind your target in order to get that additional die to hit and damage. So models like Anastasia Debray, who has backstab, are going to be great, especially since she can ambush in the side of the board. She can walk all the way around behind Morvana here and start throwing darts or making melee attacks and doing a ton of damage to this poor Warlock. Last but not least, just a real quick thing. I didn't know really where else to fit it in this video, but Rate of Fire has changed. It was announced by Private J Press, but I'm just going to talk about it real quick here. Rate of Fire is simply the number of initial attacks a model can make with their weapon. This guy used to be Rate of Fire 1. He had Strafe, which allowed him to shoot multiple times. And it used to be that you would have to buy additional attacks if your Rate of Fire was higher than 1. But now he just has a D3 plus 1 Rate of Fire. He's going to activate, make ranged attacks, roll that dice, and he's going to get potentially 4 independent shots from his gun without having to buy any attacks or make any weird special actions. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was pretty informative to you. Let me know if you have any other rules changes that I missed or anything that you would like to talk about. Or you just have cool rules that you found in the rulebook, cool little interactions between rules and models. The game's so deep, and with so many new rules, it's hard to catch them all. So I would love to hear what you think in the comments. Stay tuned for the next episode, folks.